And there's nothing worse than having some big, beautiful cabbage heads out there in your fall or winter garden. Then you get a hard freeze coming. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Sunday, August 10th here in South Georgia. And since fall planting is right around the corner, today we're going to talk about fall planting order and give you a nice kind of comprehensive guide. So when it comes to fall planting, timing is everything. Plant something too early and it may really suffer in the late summer heat, may even bolt before it matures. Plant too late and a frost may get it before you're ready to harvest. So today I'm going to walk you through a planting order that should work in pretty much any zone. So we're not talking about specific planting dates here. We're talking about the order in which you should prioritize getting certain fall or cool season veggies in the ground. And this order, I think, is very, very important to understanding cool season gardening, because not every crop or not every cool season veggie we grow is going to tolerate a freeze the same way, and some of them are going to mature much faster than others. So when we consider those things, we put together this order that I'm going to share with you today. So we've got basically 5 different categories of cool season veggies. Some of these categories have multiple veggies in them, some of them may only have one veggie in them, but we're going to use these 5 different categories and kind of the order of those 5 different categories to help you prioritize your fall garden. So first, let's start out with what we call the plant first group. The veggies in this group are probably the least tolerant of freezing temperatures, especially as they mature, and they also can take a while to mature. So the 2 veggies in this group are broccoli and cauliflower. These 2 I would prioritize planting first when it came to my fall garden. And that's because as these plants mature, as you start getting broccoli heads forming, as you start getting cauliflower heads forming, the last thing you want is a really hard freeze. Now as they grow, the plants can usually tolerate a light frost just fine, no problems. But the heads themselves are susceptible to damage. I have seen the heads take a light frost, no problems, but I've also seen certain situations where a frost on those heads there kind of turns them to mush. So you got to really be careful with these 2, and I think that's why you need to prioritize them and plant them first. Go ahead and get your broccoli and cauliflower harvested before you start getting those really hard freezes. A light frost, probably okay, but a hard freeze, you might lose your whole crop. And broccoli and cauliflower are 2 veggies that we typically like to transplant in the vegetable garden, so you have to plan ahead a little bit. If you're not buying plants, plan ahead for that time it's going to take to grow out the plants in your greenhouse or your seed starting room in your home. Now on to our second group, and this group is moderately cold tolerant but still needs some priority. And so in this group we have cabbage, lots of different types of cabbage out there, but mainly just talking about your standard green cabbage here. So cabbage heads usually don't even blink at a light frost, and sometimes they can take a harder freeze, say something around 22, 23, 24 degrees. But as those cabbage heads get larger and larger, as you get more moisture in that cabbage head, sometimes a hard freeze can cause them to split. And there's nothing worse than having some big, beautiful cabbage heads out there in your fall or winter garden. Then you get a hard freeze, come out there the next day, and they're all split open and pretty much ruined. Got to give those to the chickens. So you want to get that cabbage in the ground shortly after your broccoli and your cauliflower. It can take a light frost, but definitely want to be done with your cabbage before you start getting consistent hard freezes. And much like broccoli and cauliflower, we typically like to transplant cabbage, so give yourself time for that seed starting process if you're not buying plants. Now our third group, we're going to call this one fast grower that can bounce back. And in this group we could probably put several different varieties, but we're going to use mustard greens as the prime example for this group. So mustard greens are probably the least cold tolerant of the greens we grow in our backyard garden. They're not as cold tolerant as collards or kale. So a hard freeze will usually burn mustard green leaves. Sometimes a light frost doesn't bother them at all. I've seen a light frost burn the tips of the leaves before. I think it has a lot to do with the moisture in the air, but you usually will get some damage on mustard greens if you get a moderate to hard freeze. But the great thing about mustard greens is that they grow really fast. With some of them, you can harvest as soon as 30 days from putting a seed in the ground. So you can kind of pick your spots. You don't need a long window to get some good groceries when planting mustard greens. And even if the edges of the leaves do get burned by a frost, you can usually just come in and do a nice clean cut on your mustard greens and they will bounce back just fine. So it may not kill the plants completely, but just burns the tips of the leaves. Cut that off, they'll bounce back and you'll get repeated harvests. So you want to plant them early enough to get some good harvest before you get consistent heavy freezes. If you live in a place like we do where we don't get a lot of hard freezes, you can probably grow mustard greens all winter long. But if you're getting a hard freeze every single week, it's probably going to put a hurting on them pretty bad. So think about that. Think about the short time frame, and then you can squeeze them in before you start getting those consistent hard freezes. And typically mustard greens are something that we just direct seed in the garden, although you can transplant them if you're wanting just a small planting and some really precise spacing. You can grow them out in some seed starting trays and transplant the plugs, but they usually do just fine direct seeding. Now on to our fourth group, and we call this the flexible timing group. The veggies in this group are pretty dang cold hardy, so we don't have to be in a huge hurry to get them in the ground. We can prioritize some of this other stuff before we plant these. So in this group we have Brussels sprouts, we have collards, and we have kale. All three of those are some of the most cold hardy, cool season veggies you can grow. So let's say you're limited on garden space but wanted to grow a variety of different things this fall or winter. In early fall you could direct seed some mustard greens. Enjoy those for several weeks, and then in late fall you could transplant some Brussels sprouts, some collards, or some kale, some things that are going to be able to take the cold weather a lot better. That way you have some staggered production but also some different production. And the great thing about Brussels sprouts, collards, and kale, not only are they really cold tolerant, but the cold weather, getting a freeze on those veggies tends to enhance the flavor and make them even sweeter. So if you're a procrastinator or you just don't have space at the moment, don't worry about those three. You don't have to be in a huge hurry to get those in the ground. Brussels sprouts are typically something we transplant, so need to figure in that seed starting time. Collards and kale, those could be direct seeded or transplanted. I usually transplant mine, but a lot of people direct seed. And then lastly, our fifth group, we're going to call this the soil temperature dependent crops. And we've got three veggies in this group: carrots, beets, and spinach. So all three of the veggies in this group are relatively cold tolerant. We're not necessarily worried about getting them in before the hard freezes arrive, but these three will not germinate well unless the soil temperature is right. That's why we call them soil temperature dependent crops. So with carrots, for example, we don't want to plant our carrot seed in the garden if the soil is still warm. We're not going to get very good germination that way. We have to wait until that soil cools off a little bit, and ideally we're looking for soil temps in the 70s. So we're just kind of waiting around. Usually for us that happens in, say, early to mid-October. We're waiting for that soil temp to get in the 70s, and that's when it's go time for carrots. And spinach is kind of the same way. I've never seen it get cold enough here to really hurt spinach leaves, but spinach needs cooler soil to germinate, even cooler soil than carrots do. So for spinach, we're looking for soil temps in the 60s, not in the 70s like we are with carrots. We're looking for soil temps in the 60s, so carrots in October, and then usually by the time November rolls around for us, those soil temps are in the 60s, and we can go ahead direct seed our spinach. Now those planting times may be different depending on where you live, but that's what you're looking for with those two. You're looking for those specific soil temp windows. That's how you're going to get the best germination and the best stand of carrots or spinach. Now I know we didn't talk about every single possible fall or cool season veggie you could plant, but I think that's a pretty good selection there. Things that most people want to have in their garden in the fall months. And just to recap that planting order there, we want to make sure we get the broccoli and cauliflower plants in the ground first. Then we want to make sure we get our cabbage plants in the ground. Then we're going to direct seed some mustard greens. Then we're going to transplant our Brussels sprouts, our kale, and our collards. Then when those soil temps get in the 70s, we'll direct seed our carrots. Then when the soil temps get in the 60s, we'll direct seed our spinach. So if you follow that order there, prioritize those certain cool season veggies first, regardless of where you live, whether you live in the deep south or further north, I think you'll be successful. And not only should you be successful, you'll also have a nice succession of veggies to enjoy from the backyard grocery store from fall into winter and maybe even into the following year. So know your average first frost date. You can easily look that up online for your growing zone. Also know when you typically start getting some harder freezes, some temperatures that could damage things like broccoli or cauliflower. Once you know those dates, then you can kind of plan out, okay, I need to get these things in the ground by this time to really get a decent harvest before they could get damaged. And then there's other stuff farther down on that priority list you don't have to be necessarily in a huge hurry to plant. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, and if you've got a tentative schedule or order of planting for your zone, please do share that in the comments so other viewers can see it and look at it and kind of determine what they need to do based on where they live. And as always, you can find seeds for a lot of the varieties that will be growing this fall on our website at lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to grow carrots but have struggled with them in the past, watch this video right here. We'll go over some really simple and easy carrot planting tips that'll help you get a really nice stand of carrots either in your in-ground garden or your raised bed. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.